Hi, welcome to the Frankfort Area Chamber of Commerce 2020 Candidate Forum for the primary elections. My name is Jacqueline Pitts. I'm the Communications Director for the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce, and I'll be your moderator tonight. We want to thank our sponsors, Frankfort Plant Board and Frankfort Plant Board Cable 10, for putting on tonight's important event. We're talking tonight to the candidates in the 56th House District here in Frankfort. And each of those candidates is going to get a 1-minute opening statement, and then we will move into questions from panelists. Those questions and answers are going to be timed, and we're going to try and be as considerate as possible during that so we can get to as many important questions as possible. Candidates, if you go over your time, you will be muted. And when you're not speaking, please be muted otherwise. So after our question and answers, we'll have a 1-minute closing statement from each of the candidates as well. There should be no new issues brought up in this. This is a chance for you to state your objectives and your goals in this race. And after that, we will close our forum. So now I'm going to go ahead and introduce our wonderful panelists. We have Kristen Cantrell, who is the owner and CEO of Seven Mountains Media and Froggy and Passport Radio. We have Kathy Lindsay, who is the Communications Director at the Frankfort Plant Board, and Steve Stewart, who is the publisher at the State Journal. And now we'll introduce our candidates tonight. We have Lamar Allen and Bob Gibson. So thank you both for joining us. We are going to go in alphabetical order to start our statements and then to start the questions as well. So Mr. Allen, I will turn it over to you for your 1-minute opening statement.
Hello, my name is Lamar Allen. I am a lifelong educator. I am currently a STEM teacher at Yates Elementary School. For my entire career, I've dedicated my time and my life to working with our most impoverished and disenfranchised families in Tennessee and in Kentucky. I have been a Kentucky citizen for over 21 years. I currently reside in Lexington, Kentucky, and I decided to run because I have a 3-year-old. I want to be the example for my 3-year-old and show him that with effort, with support, you can change your community. You can make your community better. For your neighbors and your family alike. I want to thank you all for offering this platform for us to discuss issues that affect the state of Kentucky and small and large business owners.
Thank you so much, Mr. Allen. And now, Mr. Gibson, I will turn it over to you for your 1-minute opening statement.
Hey, thank you, Frankfort Chamber and everybody involved in the Frankfort community. I'm Bob Gibson. I was born and raised in the 56th District in Woodford County. I'm a graduate of Woodford County High School in 1988. Went on and had the opportunity to graduate from Center College as well as Eastern Kentucky University. Like Lamar, I am a lifelong educator. I'm a 26-year educator with 12 of those years in the classroom, teaching special ed for a couple of years and U.S. history mainly for 10 years. I also have 7 years experience as an assistant principal at Woodford County High School, and this is finishing up my 7th year as the CIO for the district here in Woodford County. I've learned my work ethic from my mother, who owned a small business in Versailles for almost 20 years, and also learned loyalty from my father. And the bottom line is I'm learning because I want everyone to have an opportunity to succeed.
Thank you both so much. So now we will enter our questions. And just a reminder, all answers are going to be timed. You can probably see that on the screen. Carmen will be holding up signs where you'll see if you have 15 seconds and then when your time is up. So we are going to go ahead and turn it over to Kristen Cantrell for our first question. And the answers on this one will start with Mr. Allen.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So Kentucky has a tax code that doesn't raise enough revenue to meet the Commonwealth's budgetary needs. And this problem existed before the impacts of COVID-19. We're just now starting to see that tax revenue is declining, and we anticipate, obviously, that's going to continue for quite some time. Can you name 2 ways that you would adapt the tax code to create a more equitable state tax structure that also raises adequate revenue to balance the budget and address our most pressing needs in education, infrastructure, and healthcare?
Absolutely. So first, we have major issues in our state regarding our tax code. Right now, our lowest earners and our middle class earners are paying a higher percentage of their income to state taxes. In fact, they're paying approximately 9 to 11%. Our highest earners are paying approximately 6% of their income to taxes. That's an issue. Currently, we still have tax loopholes for individuals or corporations that are capitalizing off of Kentucky. Our estate tax is intertwined with our federal estate tax, which is actually costing us millions of dollars. I would suggest that we decouple those estate taxes and make sure that the individuals who have an estate worth more than $1 million pay their fair share. I also am for expanding our services in our state. Currently, we are only taxing around 27 services. And when you look at our neighbors, they're taxing 47 or more services. Our economy.
Mr. Allen, we are unfortunately out of time for your answer. Okay, we will now move to Mr. Gibson for your response to the same question.
Like Mr. Allen, I'm very similar in views with him when it comes to the tax code and would support a lot of the things that he already brought up. So I'll leave that to his statement. As far as my statement, we've got a revenue problem in the state. We need to generate some more revenue. There's some opportunities that are out there. One would be in sports gaming. We've got other states that are generating revenue by legalizing sports gaming in their states, and they're able to tax that and generate that revenue. I would support that as well here. The other place I would support would be legalizing medicinal marijuana, taxing that, as well as helping our farmers and businesses grow economically with that opportunity.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Kristen, for your question. We are now going to move to Kathy Lindsay for her first question, and we will start the responses with Mr. Gibson for this question.
Kentucky's legislature, the Kentucky Legislature's Interim Joint Judiciary Committee met this morning to listen to discussion regarding recent incidents in Louisville. David James, president of the Louisville Metro Council, addressed issues like no-knock search warrants, the need for civilian review boards, and the need for legislation to address systemic racism. If elected, what measures would you support to address racial injustice across the state?
Very good question. And obviously the last several days have displayed the need for reforms across the board when it comes to judicial reforms, when it comes to systemic racism and people that are underprivileged in lots of different ways. So I would certainly support all these type of reforms. I like the idea of a review board. There needs to be an independent review board because too often police departments and other law enforcement agencies have review boards that are internal to the organization, and so it's still hindered by the organization itself. So we need independent review boards in order to determine necessary steps, including discipline if need be.
Thank you very much. Mr. Allen, we'll turn it over to you for your response. If you want to go ahead and unmute yourself.
This has just shined a spotlight on the inequality that we've had for a long time. Suggestions that I have are a civilian review board, but a democratically elected civilian review board that is not made up of a situation where you have police investigating police officers. I think we really need to delve deep into implicit bias training for our police officers. And then also, I know this gets thrown around a lot, but we need to have real community policing. We should have individuals from the community policing those communities. So in order to do that, I think we need to look at the demographics of our new recruits and make sure that they're aligned with the community numbers in terms of ethnicity. So that way you have community members who know the officers who are actually patrolling their streets.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Kathy, for the question. We will turn it over to Steve Stewart for the next round of questions and start with Mr. Allen for the responses.
Good evening, gentlemen. You are running as Democrats to serve in a chamber with a Republican supermajority. Most experts don't think will change much, if any, in November. How would you advance legislation that you care about in a party that is in such a minority in that chamber? And on the other hand, how would you stop legislation that you oppose?
Yeah, so I'm a firm believer that, the party may be in minority, but the ideas don't have to be in the minority. I do think that there are opportunities for us to find common ground. I think you were able to find that just this year when it came to putting price caps on life-saving medication. I think that if you're a Democrat in Kentucky in 2020, you have to be able to work with Republicans. That's just the name of the game. In terms of denying or trying to fight against policy that you think will negatively impact your community and communities around you, I think that also goes back to creating those relationships, establishing relationships with individuals so they understand where you're coming from and understand the experiences that you have and how their policy could negatively impact you and people like you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Gibson, your response.
As a 14-year administrator, I've had to work with people from all different viewpoints and walks of life, and we've not always agreed on the actions to take place. And it's very important that you can work with all these individuals. I, as an educator, happen to be the chairperson of the Woodford County Chamber of Commerce for a couple of years. And so building those relationships with the business community and others that I had not had the opportunity to work with in the past, I would take the same thing to the legislature. I've always worked with individuals from all walks of life, and it's important that you build those bonds, and where there are some common ground, we obviously need to work together and push that legislation.
Thank you both very much. And Steve, unless you have a follow-up question, we are going to move to Kristen to start the next round of questions.
Okay, so Kentucky has the 9th highest incarceration rate in the country and second in the nation for incarcerating women. In addition, Black Kentuckians make up 8.3% of the state population, but 21% of the state's incarcerated population. If you're elected, what will you do to address these inequalities, and how would you invest resources into the communities most impacted by the system to change this scenario?
Well, education programs are definitely needed throughout the different communities. And I know here in Woodford County, we work very closely with the county jail in order to educate inmates and provide them with pathways to, get off drugs if they're addicted and anything of that nature. Also put themselves in a position where they'll learn a skill or a trade where they can come out of jail and be in good shape. Overall, as far as policies, we've got to make sure that there's equity when it comes to the justice system, because unfortunately what happens too often is public defenders are defending people, whereas if they had attorneys that were, stop time. Like to see attorney equity across the board as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gibson. We will move to you, Mr. Allen, now.
Unmute
yourself.
As an African-American male, I have several family members who have been incarcerated. This is a social injustice, particularly for those who are incarcerated for petty crime and things like marijuana, which I believe should be recreational. I think that, one, if you look at the amount of money that we spend on corrections since 2016, it has increased 16% in our state. So what you're looking at is we're really incentivizing more people to go to prison because someone is profiting off of that. I think it's important that we focus on education, rehabilitation for those individuals and getting them into the workforce. If you do that, you can then decrease the amount of money that we're putting into corrections, and that's to the greater benefit of everyone. And you're making more individuals who were in corrections employable.
Thank you
much. And thank you, Kristen, for the question. We will now move to Kathy Lindsay for the next question, and we will start the responses with Mr. Allen.
Okay. During COVID-19, Attorney General Daniel Cameron has questioned the governor's powers under KRS Chapter 39A during states of emergency, calling the order unprecedented and devoid of checks and balances. He's commented on non-essential businesses being closed without due process and believes the legislature should have more oversight during a state of emergency. Do you think there is enough oversight, the legislature has enough oversight over the governor, and do you agree with the Attorney General that the General Assembly should have the permission to terminate a state of emergency at any time?
I do not agree with Daniel Cameron. I do not. I believe that our governor's number one job is to make sure Kentuckians are safe. I believe his number one priority is to make sure that we do not have family members who are in the hospital, sick and dying. There is two sides to this coin. Yes, our businesses, particularly our business on Main Street, are critical to the success for our communities, small and large. But at the same time, those businesses can't operate when you have mass death and mass sickness. So there's got to be a middle ground. And I actually believe Governor Beshear has made the right decision. It was the cautious decision, but it was also the safe decision, and it prevents so much tragedy in our state.
Mr. Gibson, your answer to the same question.
Well, the number one responsibility of the governor is to provide for the safety and well-being of all the residents of Kentucky, and he certainly has done that through his executive orders and actions. And Kentucky has shown through this process in time that we've been one of the better states as far as trying to contain the pandemic as much as at least is possible under the current circumstances. As far as oversight is concerned, the Attorney General, as well as the legislature, needs to look at oversight abilities and rights. But when it comes to executive orders that are for the well-being and safety of the individuals, I would completely disagree with the Attorney General.
Thank you both very much, and thank you, Kathy. Steve, we'll move to you for the next question.
Abortion restrictions have been a major focus of the General Assembly in recent sessions, and Republican leadership says it will be again in the 2021 regular session. What abortion restrictions, if any, would you support if elected?
I'm not going to support any restrictions. I mean, we're already restricted in this state down to one clinic, if my understanding is correct. And so there are plenty of restrictions that the state has already placed on women's health care when it comes to the area of abortion. This is an area that the federal government spoke to in the 70s. It's something that we need to live up to. I totally support women's right to choose, and any, and some of the funding issues that you hear about with Planned Parenthood and things of that nature, and abortion being only one of the type of services that are provided. We need to do what's best for women's health overall.
Thank you very much. We'll move to Mr. Allen now.
As a candidate, I've signed a pro-choice pledge. I believe that our government should not have a role in making decisions or guiding women to specific health care choices for themselves. Likewise, as a man, I do not have a role in making that decision. I think far too often, even when you look at our legislative body, this is a legislative body that is dominated predominantly by white men. And they're not the ones having to go and make those decisions. So I'm 100% for women being able to make the choice that is best for them.
Thank you both very much. We are going to go for one more round of questions where each of our panelists will ask you guys another question. So we're going to turn it over to Kristen Cantrell for the next question.
Nearly 400,000 low-income Kentuckians qualified for health care for the first time ever under the Affordable Care Act. But there are major challenges here in Kentucky, and for a variety of reasons, local health departments are already underfunded and will most likely receive further cuts, so they will face staffing challenges as well. What would you do to ensure that all Kentuckians will have access to quality, affordable health care?
Yes, so I am a proponent of Medicare for all Kentuckians. I think it's an absolute travesty that we have individuals who do not have easy access to healthcare. I think that is not okay. For me, I think we first need to really look at expanding our taxable revenue. I'm for recreational marijuana. I am for expanded gaming and reforming our tax code. I think that revenue will be a major boon to the state of Kentucky. I think that will begin the process of allowing every Kentuckian to have access to health care, regardless of age.
Thank you very much. Mr. Gibson, your answer.
I'm in support of a single-payer healthcare system as well. Medicare for all would be great if we could do that throughout the nation. And what the business community has been basically competing with each other for decades now on different incentives to have or to maintain their employees and providing packages for them. And I look at a single-payer healthcare system as a way for businesses to get out of the business of paying for health insurance, because everybody's going to already be covered. That should free up some economic activity on their end, which should overall help America to the betterment of all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Kristen. Kathy Lindsay, we'll move to you now for the next question.
Okay. Kentucky is one of 28 states without laws protecting LGBTQ people from discrimination in employment, housing, and public accommodations. Some states have passed a compromise bill. Would you consider to pass legislation that provides protections for LGBTQ people while carving out exceptions based on religious beliefs?
That has been the big argument around is a lot of communities, including all the communities in the 56th district, have passed fairness ordinances, but most of them have had the exclusion, the religious exclusions there. I personally don't like religious exclusions in there, because if you're going to pass a fairness ordinance, it should be fairness for all and not have exclusions in there. I understand why in our community right here in the 56, why the communities did vote the way they did. But my personal belief is if we're going to be fair, we're going to be fair to all, and we're not going to allow any type of discrimination.
Go ahead, Mr. Allen.
So the exclusion allows the fairness ordinance to pass, which is better than it not passing. But I am not a proponent of the exclusions. Like Mr. Gibson, I believe that a fairness ordinance should be fair for everyone, no matter what business you go to, no matter where you are. I am a proponent of a statewide fairness ordinance. I was actually endorsed by CFAIR. As someone in a marginalized community, from a marginalized community, I realize that it's not okay for you not to be able to go to any location and feel that you can execute and exercise the same rights as other individuals. I think that we should look to removing the exemption and making sure it's fair for every Kentuckian.
Thank you all, and thank you, Kathy. We'll move to Steve now for the next question.
Local governments, like all levels of government, face significant fiscal challenges in the years ahead. Many city and county officials in Kentucky would like the option of local sales taxes. Are there any circumstances under which you would vote for legislation that would allow, for example, the city of Frankfort or Franklin County to levy its own local sales tax? And if so, with what restrictions?
You broke up there. Could you repeat that?
Yeah, happy to. It's challenging times for local governments are ahead. I think we can all agree. Many cities and counties in Kentucky would like the option to levy local sales taxes. for example, on restaurant bills. This would require legislation from the General Assembly and approval by the governor. Under what circumstances would you allow local governments to levy local sales taxes, and with what restrictions?
Yeah, so I actually would be open to that, but there's a couple exceptions. I think it really depends on not only the demographics, but the economic demographics of your community. I think that you get into a situation where you are taxing your poor and middle class out of a community. That cannot be okay. So I think there has to be an outside board or committee that can assess if your community is able to withstand a tax of that matter, and what will the impact be on some of our marginalized communities if that tax is assessed. Under those circumstances, I would be okay with reviewing it and looking at a local tax.
Thank you very much. Mr. Gibson, your answer.
This is a topic that's actually come up in my discussions and conversations with the judge executives and mayors in the 56th district. They brought up the fact that there are times that they need to have a local tax that is a temporary tax in order to complete a project that is very specific and or to be able to conduct a project that may be needed for their community. So in that type of restricted case, let's say that the state is paying for roads up to a certain point, but yet that road actually travels a little bit longer than the state is approved. You may want to go ahead and finish that job, and if you had a local tax that you were able to levy, you could finish that project.
Quick follow-up question, Jacqueline.
No problem. Go right ahead.
Gentlemen, would you require a local citizen referendum in order for the tax to be enacted?
I'll go first. Yes. I mean, this kind of goes to what I had brought up earlier, which was you could be in a situation where you're taxing individuals out of your community. So I do think it's important that your community members get to speak. But with that being said, as we know, the majority of a community may not technically represent the minority of the community. So I do think that that's really touch and go for me, because I think you really have to assess who is in your community before you allow everyone to vote. We have historical evidence that the majority doesn't always vote to the needs of the minority in a community.
To answer the question, I would support a referendum, just like the nickel tax for school districts to try to build buildings is what it's used for the most. The nickel tax is subject to referendum. Then these type of additional taxes would need to be subject to that as well. And if the community supports those projects, obviously they would vote for it. If the community doesn't, then they wouldn't. So yes, I would support that.
Thank you.
Thank you all. We're going to do another question from Kristen Cantrell, and then we'll probably move to our closing statements unless either of the other panelists have some questions they want to go ahead and ask. But we'll turn it over to Kristen for another question.
In regards to climate change, what policies do you support, such as clean energy jobs and reducing high energy bills that could benefit all Kentuckians, including low-income communities, communities of color, and those who are most impacted by the changing climate?
I believe this is my question. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes, go right ahead.
Awesome. So, yeah, the climate crisis impacts the individuals who are already struggling, and the ones that are just on that teetering line between making it and not making it. I think this is really apparent, particularly in the inner city. I teach at a school that is in the middle of a food desert, and you have individuals who cannot grow their own produce. But let's take this back to farmers as well. The change in climate is really impacting their overall production. So for me, I do believe in green jobs. I do believe that we can retrain individuals who are currently using who are in coal jobs and in quote unquote dirty energy jobs, and get them into renewable energy jobs so that we can save money and really propel our economy for the future.
Go ahead,
Yeah,
Mr. Gibson.
Yeah, Kentucky needs to be the first state in the union that really embraces green energy, green jobs, and takes off economically with that whole idea. We would have some opportunities with wind in particular in certain areas of the state. Solar is starting to take off. I see more and more, even driving around the 56th district, I see more and more solar panels on people's homes and people taking advantage of that. We need to be able to generate more energy through solar that our grid can even purchase energy from homes throughout the state to place in the grid and then move that energy around where needed. So there's lots of opportunities economically and with jobs.
Thank you.
Thank you all. We're going to go ahead and do another question from Kathy and then one from Steve. So we're going to go ahead and turn it over to Kathy Lindsay for the next question.
Okay. I was looking at the time. We have time, so let's do it. This is the Chamber Forum, and we focus on our businesses and our local businesses. But one issue that we've heard from businesses is as far as our workers. Once they find skilled workers to fill jobs, they often cannot pass a drug test. So what can you do in the legislature to help address this issue?
Start with Mr. Gibson on that one.
That is a tough question, and that's a question we've heard over and over at the Woodford Chamber as well. The drug epidemic is a problem throughout the country and with employees across the board, and it doesn't really matter what type of jobs you're talking about. It seems to find its way in several different areas. Education, treatment centers. We need to put more money into treatment centers, both to help the prison population and the employee population. Businesses need to have the opportunity to try to put employees into treatment centers to where they can keep them as employees, but yet get the treatment that they need, and the state could fund that to better help the businesses overall.
Yes, so I think in terms of policy, decriminalizing marijuana is priority number one. One, because of tax implications, but then also a person who uses recreational marijuana is not unfit to work, right? And they have skills. So in policy wise, that is number one. Number two, I think also making sure that we do provide funding for locations like here in Lexington, Hope Center. I think they do amazing work. They do amazing work with men and women, and that gets them on the right foot. But I also have to say that just because an individual has an issue with a drug does not mean that they are not capable to do the work. We have to have a little bit more empathy for those individuals.
Thank you both very much, and thank you, Kathy. We will move to Steve for another question, and we'll start with Mr. Allen for the response.
Name a current elected official, local, state, or federal, you admire, and tell us why.
Yes, for me, it's Attica Scott. She is in West Louisville. I think that one, she's a trailblazer. You know, she's the first African American we've had in years. And with that being said, I think that her perspective is unique in that she is pushing policy that normally would not be pushed if it wasn't for her experience and background. For example, she has a bill for maternal health, and that's geared towards predominantly our most marginalized communities. Our African American and Latinx women have a much higher rate of death and issues when they're going through pregnancy. And I think that that's a bill that would not have been passed if it wasn't for, in this case, a Black woman in our legislature.
And my response would be our current 56th district representative, Joe Gravis. I've known Joe Gravis for over 20 years. And one of the things that many people don't know about him in his ownership of the McDonald's restaurants in all three counties that make up the 56 is the fact that he was a patron to so many kids in our local communities. Basically, any child that sent him a donation request for different athletic events or arts events or anything of that nature, he sponsored tons and tons and tons of those individual kids as well as the programs. And so I've always admired him. And the other piece that I admire about him in the legislature is how well he has worked across the aisle to be a co-signer on bills with Republicans where he saw that would be beneficial, as well as his work on the pension problems.
Thank you both very much. So now we will move to our 1-minute closing statement from each of the candidates. Just a reminder, no new issues should be brought up in this. It's really just to recap, cover anything you didn't get to, and talk about your objectives in this race. We're going to go ahead and go back to our alphabetical order just to make things simple and start with Mr. Allen for your 1-minute closing statement, please.
Yes, hello. Again, my name is Lamar Allen. I'm a lifelong educator, currently a STEM teacher at Yates Elementary School. I was in charge of turning around the second lowest performing school in the state of Tennessee as an administrator. I have a passion for children, and I believe that my own 3-year-old son deserves a quality education. I believe he deserves health care. And I believe that he deserves people fighting for him who will put people over politics. And I believe that the constituents of the 56th district deserve that as well. So with that being said, I encourage you to look at my website, which is lamar4ky.com. Check it out. I have my issues. I have press releases and everything that you need to know about me. I'm an open book. You can literally click on a tab and ask me a question. I'll get back to you within 30 seconds. What I did want to do is thank the Frankfort Plant Board for this opportunity. Thank the Frankfort Chamber for doing amazing work on behalf of small businesses and really being in tune with what is happening on a daily basis in the state of Kentucky. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Allen. Mr. Gibson, we'll turn it over to you for your 1-minute closing statement.
Thank you, Frankfort Plant Board, as well as the Frankfort Chamber for hosting us tonight. It's been great to participate in. Like Lamar, obviously I have a passion for children as well, 26 years in the profession. It's been so nice. Actually, I have former students of mine from the classroom that are a part of my campaign team and actually encouraged me to run. And so that was a great joy when I received those phone calls several months ago to start heading down this journey. The other piece, healthcare for all, is so important. The pandemic has basically put a black mark on the country on our dysfunctional healthcare system that we currently have, and we need to make sure we correct that. And then please visit my website. I also posted on Facebook today. Bob Gibson for Kentucky posted a commercial today on Facebook, so check that out if you want to give me a look.
Thank you all so much. I want to go ahead and thank our panelists, our candidates, and our partners, the Frankfort Plant Board and Cable 10, Froggy and Passport Radio, and the State Journal. On behalf of the Frankfort Chamber of Commerce, we hope that this forum today has given you the information you need when it comes time to vote this month. Make sure that you are checking out govoteky.com for all the information you need on early voting, absentee voting, and all of your options leading up to the primary elections on June 23rd. And thank you all again so much for joining us.